Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine standing on the edge of this really complex, bustling world. You know you have to step into it, but you've got absolutely no map, maybe less experience than, well, someone who's never left a quiet, protected bubble.
Right? It sounds thrilling, maybe, but also pretty terrifying.
Exactly. Suddenly you're just thrust right into the heart of London's, demanding, often baffling social scene.
And that feeling that stepping into the unknown armed only with innocence, maybe, and rules you just don't get. That's what we're diving into today.
It is. Our source material is from Frances Burney's novel Evelina. It was published anonymously way back in the late 18th century. We're exploring these excerpts that give us a really sharp, sometimes hilarious look at English society through the eyes of a young woman who's, well, navigating it for the very first time.
Yeah, and what makes this deep dive so rich, I think, is that our sources aren't just the story itself, but letters from Evelina.
Yeah.
So you get her immediate reactions, her confusion, her sort of wins and embarrassments, right, in her own words.
And alongside those, we have letters from her guardian, Mr. Villars. He gives us that crucial context and, reveals his own deep anxieties about her whole journey.
Right.
So our mission today is basically to follow Evelina as she enters this world. We want to understand the incredible range of people she meets, try to decode the often bizarre social rules and the clashes she experiences.
And ultimately kind of extract what this story tells us about character, about class, vulnerability, and that, universal human thing of trying to find your place.
Yeah, this isn't just a plot summary. It's really an exploration of the social insights Burney packed into these pages.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, let's begin actually not with Evelina, but with the author, stepping onto a different kind of public stage. The preface to the novel itself gives us this fascinating parallel.
Oh, right. The writer talks about the anxious solicitude and the first terrors of facing public criticism with something new.
Exactly. They appeal to the magistrates of the press for impartiality and prejudice. It was a wonderful phrase, isn't it?
It really is. They're asking for leniency, reminding critics, you were all young writers once.
And why does starting there matter for our deep dive into Evelina?
Well, it immediately sets this tone, doesn't it? Of the vulnerability of putting something new out into the world, whether it's a novel or like an inexperienced young woman.
Yeah, the author's anxiety kind of mirrors Evelina's own as she faces this world that's ready to judge her.
Definitely. So let's meet Evelina then and understand this protected bubble she's emerging from.
Okay, so the sources tell us Evelina was raised in almost total rural seclusion at a place called Berry Hill by the benevolent Mr. Villars.
Right. He described as this kind, protective guardian. He calls her his only hope he has on earth.
And he deliberately kept her away from the great world, didn't he? Mostly because he's haunted by the misery and disgrace her mother suffered there, related to Sir John Belmont.
That isolation is so key, isn't it? She's been totally shielded from complex social stuff, from deception, from the harsh realities of reputation and status.
Yeah, Mr. Villars describes her as innocent as an angel and artless as purity itself. He's nurtured her virtues, sure, but hasn't really given her the tools to navigate a world that doesn't always value them.
But this quiet life, this carefully constructed peace, it gets disrupted.
It does. Madame Duval, who is Evelina's French grandmother, suddenly reappears after years and years, and this immediately causes perplexity and uneasiness for Mr. Villars.
And you see why pretty quickly when you read how he describes her. He doesn't hold back at all.
No, he calls her uneducated and unprincipled, ungentle in temper, and unamiable in her manners. Ouch.
Right. She might claim remorse for neglecting Evelina, but Villars just sees her as completely unsuitable to guide this innocent girl into society.
So they reach a compromise. Evelina will go to London, but not with Madame Duval. She'll go with Mrs. Mirvan and her family, stay at Howard Grove.
Mr. Villars is clearly hesitant. He says, I dare not hesitate at a request from Mrs. Mirvan yet. But he sees the Mirvans' home as, like, the safer bet.
Yeah. In sending her to Howard Grove, not one of these scruples arise, he says. And her old nurse, Mrs. Clinton, will go too for some familiar support.
Still, his letters around this time are quite moving, really. He expresses this deep fear, worrying that in sending her, he's lost my child.
He really weighs the potential benefits of, the gaiety of the whole party versus the dull life with him against these huge risks to her innocence and safety.
It's framed as this massive leap of faith, isn't it? He's praying for heaven to guard, watch over you, defend you. It really sets the stakes.
It absolutely does. She's basically been raised in a moral greenhouse, and now she's being transplanted into potentially hostile soil. So let's follow her. Her first steps into what the outline called the labyrinth of London. What does her unspoiled view show us?
Well, her reaction to St. James Park is just priceless. Tells you everything about her expectations versus the reality.
What does she say?
She sees a long, straight walk of dirty gravel, and at each end, instead of an open prospect, nothing is to be seen but houses built of brick.
Huh. So much for grandeur. Her idealized picture just shatters against, well, mundane, dirty reality.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Even shopping is an experience. She notes the mercer's shops, these fancy fabric stores, and the 6 or 7 men belonging to each shop who are constantly bowing and smirking.
It's a small detail, but it captures that performative aspect of society, doesn't it? Even just buying something. Everyone's playing a role.
Totally. And this performance thing, combined with her total inexperience, it really comes to a head at the ball at Mrs. Stanley's. That's a key early scene.
Right, where she meets two very different men, two contrasting approaches to women, really.
Exactly. First, there's Lord Orville. He's the picture of respectful politeness, serious, considerate, ask as he'd been so unhappy as to offend me. He sees she's uncomfortable and tries to ease it.
And then on the flip side,
Sir Clement Willoughby. He's the fashionable guy, smooth, but really forward, almost aggressive. He says to Orville right in front of her, dismissing her, "For, my lord, though I have made diligent inquiry, I can hear of no such person."
ooh, just dismisses her entirely.
Yeah. And Evelina's letter about all this is just full of her complete embarrassment and confusion. She has no idea how to handle Sir Clement's rudeness. She's awkward just walking, feels pressured about needing a dance partner.
And she tells that little lie about being engaged, right? Just to get out of it.
Exactly. It shows how little social armor she has. She's just desperately trying to escape the awkwardness.
And just as she's reeling from all that, another disruptive force lands on the scene, her grandmother, Madame Duval.
Lands is the right word. Her arrival isn't gentle. It's more like a collision. Especially with Captain Mirvan, Mrs. Mirvan's husband.
Ah, the captain. He seems to take instant pleasure in tormenting Madame Duval, doesn't he? Fueled by his intense dislike of anything French.
Totally. He calls her a dirty fellow, which is weirdly insulting, and makes these genuinely shocking threats, like wanting to trip her out the window into the mud.
It's just cruel, needlessly cruel.
It is. And Madame Duval reacts with increasing passion, which of course just eggs him on more. Plus, she immediately declares she wants to take Evelina back to France, creating a whole new problem for everyone.
Right. More conflict. And this clash of personalities, of values, it's really on display when they visit Ranelagh Gardens.
Yeah, that fashionable public pleasure ground. Supposed to be elegant, see and be seen, but for Evelina's group, it just becomes another battleground.
Madame Duval's complaining bitterly about the captain, saying things like, "There isn't a hairdresser, nor nobody that wouldn't blush to be in your company."
And he just keeps insulting her, calling her Mrs. Frog. It's relentless, petty antagonism.
But then Lord Orville shows up.
Right, and the contrast is immediate and stark. Evelina notes his politeness, which knows no intermission and makes no distinction. He treats everyone, even the awful captain and Madame Duval, with basic courtesy.
It highlights that key theme Burney's exploring, doesn't it? That true good breeding is about character and respect, not just status or knowing the superficial rules.
Definitely. But the captain's cruelty then escalates dramatically at Ranelagh. There's this really disturbing incident.
What happens?
He physically grabs Madame Duval by the shoulders and shakes her so violently that she screamed out for help. And his threat that he'd hit her if she were 1 ounce less old or less ugly, it's chilling.
Wow. That's not just social awkwardness anymore. That's raw, almost casual brutality right there under the surface of polite society.
Exactly. That specific moment really sticks with you. It underlines how vulnerable people could be, even adults, to malice.
So moving from that sort of polished cruelty to something else entirely, Evelina then meets Madame Duval's other relatives, the Brantons.
Ah, the Brantons. This introduces a whole new kind of social challenge for her, just blatant vulgarity, zero social filter.
They represent a different social level, right? And their interactions are just intrusive, like asking Miss never saw her papa. Super personal.
Yeah, and they comment bluntly on her clothes, her appearance. Evelina finds their behavior uneducated and unprincipled, which echoes Mr. Villar's description of Madame Duval earlier. Their total lack of refinement just makes her deeply uncomfortable.
And she's forced to go out with them to museums, the theater.
Yes, and their reactions just highlight their lack of taste. At the opera, young Mr. Brighton complains, "Why, there's nothing but singing. I wonder when they'll speak." Completely missing the point.
And Mr. Lovel, who sometimes joins them, admits he didn't even know what play they were seeing.
Right. It's absurd. Evelina's letters are full of her embarrassment, her discomfort being seen with him. It really shows how alienated she feels across the board. Too naive for the sophisticated set, too refined for the vulgar crowd. She doesn't quite fit anywhere.
Meanwhile, Sir Clement Willoughby hasn't just vanished.
Oh no, he continues his uncommon assiduity. He keeps pursuing Evelina, and it feels less like genuine courtship and more like a campaign.
She notes his language is always that of a man of fashion, flattering, right? But his insistence, described as vehement and free, feels almost pushy, like forcing that ticket on her she didn't want.
Exactly. It's that mix, the fashionable surface, but this underlying pressure that makes him seem, well, dangerous.
And that pressure really boils over in the Spring Gardens incident.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. Evelina, desperate to get away from the Brantons, tries this prearranged signal with Sir Clement, but it all goes wrong. They end up alone together in these dark alleys.
And that's when he drops the act.
Completely. His behavior shifts instantly from persistent suitor to predator. That line, "Oh, that I had sooner met with thee," basically reveals his intention to take advantage of her being isolated.
But just then,
Lord Orville appears, like a rescuing knight.
and Evelina's reaction is key, immediate shame and confusion at being found alone with Sir Clement.
Right. It perfectly illustrates how precarious things were for young women. One misstep, one moment of trusting the wrong person, and your reputation, even your safety, is instantly at risk. Orville's appearance saves her, literally and socially.
Speaking of risk and cruelty, the ditch prank, that's another unforgettable, awful moment.
Truly awful. Captain Mirvan, and we later gather Sir Clement was in on it too, orchestrates this incredibly cruel trick on Madame Duval.
They trick her into getting out of the carriage in the dark, saying it's broken.
And then they just grab her and throw her into a ditch. Evelina's description of her grandmother afterwards is horrifying. Utmost agony of rage and terror, her face this frightful mess of tears, which, with her rouge, made so frightful a mixture that she hardly looked human.
Just brutal, and the detail about the servants laughing.
It just underscores the casual cruelty of it all. Madame Duval is furious, demanding revenge and justice, saying, "I'll see that villain hanged." It's visceral.
It's a shocking reminder, isn't it, that behind the polite facade, real brutality and malice could exist, and these pranks could have serious consequences.
Absolutely. So after all these intense London experiences, Evelina finally returns to Berry Hill. How does Mr. Villars react? Is he relieved? Worried?
Both, I think. His initial reaction is just profound anxiety. He really fears the worst, that London has corrupted her. He writes, "I have lost my child."
Wow. That says a lot about how he views the city as inherently dangerous to innocence.
It does. But then he's relieved to see her seemingly unchanged. Still, he remains deeply concerned about the dangers she faced and the potential for losing her artless purity.
But the drama isn't over. It follows her back home.
Right. Madame Duval turns up at Berry Hill, confronts Mr. Villars, demands Evelina go back to Paris with her, and she threatens to disinherit her if she refuses.
So that really raises the stakes. Now, Evelina's potential financial future is tied to obeying this grandmother she barely knows and actively dislikes.
And adding another layer of complexity, there's this suggestion of a lawsuit. Lady Harried thinks Evelina should sue Sir John Belmont to prove her legitimacy and claim her inheritance.
Lady Howard sounds pragmatic. She argues Evelina has merit which ought not to be buried in obscurity, that she deserves her birthright.
But Mr. Villars is deeply against it. He expresses anxiety to which I look forward with dread. He's haunted by what happened to Evelina's mother, his promise to protect the child.
He fears exposing her to her father's world, right? Seeing it as letting her stumble into some dreadful pit.
Exactly. It highlights that central conflict, the world's demand for status and inheritance versus this deep desire for protection and emotional well-being.
Meanwhile, Madame Duval is still fuming about the ditch prank. Does she try to get justice?
She does. She tries to complain to a justice of the peace. Fails completely. Not enough evidence, and M. Dubois, her only witness, isn't there. This makes her suspect another trick, and her wrath was inconceivably violent.
So even official justice seems like a frustrating dead end in this world. Burney is showing us that too.
Yeah, and Evelina keeps having these uncomfortable run-ins, especially with the Brantons and this Mr. Smith character back in London.
Mr. Smith. Their vulgarity is just relentless, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Smith's attempts at courtship are so crude.
Right, telling her she's monstrous smart in that awful proposal, "There is nobody so likely to catch me at last as yourself." It just highlights the lack of real connection or respect in so many of these interactions she endures.
But amidst all this social awkwardness, A figure of genuine distress emerges, Mr. Macartney, the poor Scotch poet.
Yes. Evelina is struck by his appearance. Meager, his hair looks squalid, and she feels real compassion for him.
And then things take a shocking turn. She gets a letter from him.
A suicide note, revealing his total despair over lost love, poverty, his intention to end his life right then.
Wow. This is a moment that really shows Evelina's innate goodness, her courage. It's such a contrast to the self-absorption she's often surrounded by.
Absolutely. She doesn't hesitate. She actually rushes to his lodging, finds him just about to shoot himself.
And she stops him.
Yes, cries out, "Oh, for heaven's sake, forbear," and manages to take the pistols from him. It reveals this incredible strength of character way beyond just navigating drawing rooms.
And then the Brantons and Smith arrive right after.
Typical. And their reactions are just awful, calling it a beggarly conquest, Smith getting jealous. It just underscores their complete lack of empathy in the face of real human suffering. Highlights how different Evelina truly is.
Definitely. So after those dramatic events, Evelina heads off to Bristol, and she gets a new companion, Mrs. Selwyn.
Yes, Mrs. Selwyn. She's a fascinating character, has this unmerciful propensity to satire, a really sharp, witty tongue.
So a different kind of guide for Evelina. More cynical, maybe?
Exactly. Offers a more critical perspective on society, which is quite a contrast to Evelina's gentler nature.
And in Bristol, she meets yet another layer of the upper class at Mrs. Beaumont's place. Lord Merton, Lady Louisa, Mr. Lovel again.
Right, and these characters just embody affectation and laziness. Lady Louisa claiming the heat will kill me instead of just saying she can't be bothered to move.
And they show this chilling superficiality, that casual cruelty suggesting racing old women for fun.
It's awful. Mr. Lovel keeps up his ridiculous act, and Captain Mirvan shows up, tells the story of the ditch prank again, and this time explicitly names Sir Clement as his accomplice.
Ah, confirmation. So we know for sure he was involved.
Yes. But most importantly, Lord Orville reappears in Bristol.
Okay. And their first meeting there is a bit strained, right? Because of that forged letter Evelina thought was from him.
Exactly. Her view of him is clouded by that deception. But he's polite, persistent, seeks her out, and eventually reveals the sole motive of my journey was to see you.
So the clarification about the letters, that's a huge moment for them and for the plot.
Absolutely pivotal. He's genuinely confused by her coldness at first. Then he insists he never wrote that rude letter, nor did he get the earlier one she sent him.
So it clears his name completely and reveals someone. Obviously, Sir Clement was actively trying to sabotage them, intercepting letters, forging them.
It's a real victory for genuine character over that kind of malicious deception.
And just as things are clearing up with Orville, a huge revelation about Evelina's own identity starts brewing in Bristol.
Right. They hear that Miss Belmont, the acknowledged daughter of Sir John Belmont, is also in Bristol. This news hits Evelina like a thunderbolt.
Understandably. And Mrs. Selwyn, with her sharp mind, immediately decides, we will learn the truth of all this. She's on the case.
And during this time, Lord Orville's character is really cemented as the true gentleman.
How so?
Well, he confirms his genuine respect and admiration for Evelina, setting himself totally apart from the manipulative Sir Clement. And crucially, he steps in during that horrifying suggestion about racing the poor old women.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he protects Evelina, and Lady Louisa expresses genuine horror, saying, good heaven, that so much sweetness and sensibility should be exposed to such a set. He really stands out as this beacon of morality amidst all the casual cruelty.
So the truth about her parents finally comes out. Mrs. Selwyn arranges a confrontation with Sir John Belmont.
She does. Evelina is terrified, described as almost senseless, but she's hidden and overhears the conversation. She hears Sir John confirm his past relationship with her mother, and crucially, his long-held belief that their legitimate child died.
Ah, so he didn't abandon her knowingly, he thought she didn't exist.
Precisely. And then comes that other incredible plot twist involving Mr. Macartney, the poet she saved.
What's the connection?
It turns out Mr. Macartney is Sir John Belmont's illegitimate son, the only son of the unfortunate Miss Macartney.
Huh?
No way.
Yeah. And his suicide attempt, it was because he discovered the woman he loved and planned to elope with was his half-sister, the other Miss Belmont.
Wow. Burney really weaves those threads, identity, illegitimacy, hidden family ties together powerfully there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this sets up the emotional core, the reconciliation between Evelina and her father.
She finally meets him properly.
Yes. She gives him her mother's last letter. His reaction is intense, deep remorse, grief. He cries out, "Thou art sainted. "Thou art blessed, and I am cursed forever." He acknowledges his past wrongs, finally gives Evelina his blessing.
The recognition she needed, finally, even if it comes with all that regret.
Exactly. And with her identity finally established, acknowledged, things move incredibly quickly towards resolution.
Right. Sir John and Mrs. Selwyn decide both daughters need to be married off fast.
Very pragmatic. Evelina is to marry Lord Orville. And the other Miss Belmont, well, now that the whole half-sibling thing stopped her elopement with Macartney, she's free to marry him, now knowing their true relationship.
And Lord Orville is okay with all this backstory.
Apparently so. He knew her story, likely from Mrs. Selwyn, and just expresses his quiet happiness. It's a neat resolution, maybe typical for the genre, but it still shows how society's pressures dictate the outcomes.
But even as things wrap up nicely for Evelina, Burney includes one last kind of jarring social observation.
Ah, yes, the monkey incident, right at the very end.
Captain Mirvan and some other guy, Mr. Coverley, are tormenting poor Mr. Lovel that affected fought by setting a monkey on him.
And the monkey actually bites him. Lovel's crying out, "Oh, I shall die, oh, I'm bit to death." It's crude, cruel, and honestly a bit absurd.
Why end with that, do you think? It feels deliberate.
I think it is. It's like Burney's reminding us.
Yeah.
Okay, Evelina found her happiness, her place with the virtuous Lord Orville, but the world she navigated, with all its vulgarity, casual cruelty, ridiculous affectations, that world hasn't fundamentally changed.
Right. The monkey incident is like a final stark example of the persistent unpleasantness and malice that still exists out there, totally separate from Evelina's happy ending.
It's like a final reminder that the labyrinth is still there.
Yeah.
So looking back at her whole journey, from total naivety through meeting all these characters, finding her identity, what are the key takeaways Burney gives us?
Well, first, as we've talked about, that huge commentary on genuine character versus just, performing socially.
Definitely. That whole spectrum of characters, Orville versus Clement, the Brantons versus Mrs. Mirvan, the Mertons and Lovel versus Evelina herself, it's like a masterclass in hypocrisy versus authenticity.
Burney uses them to show that real worth isn't about status or money or knowing the rules. It's about integrity, kindness, empathy.
And her journey really highlights the huge challenges for someone without connections, money, or a clear identity in a society obsessed with reputation. Every stumble, every embarrassment, her vulnerability, it just underscores how unforgiving that world was for outsiders.
Absolutely. It makes you think, doesn't it? How much of what we still navigate socially, even now, is performance? What can we learn from Evelina about judging people in first impressions?
What does her experience tell us about the difference between just like following the rules versus having genuine character?
Her story seems to suggest that while you need some understanding of the world to survive, ultimately the things that lead to real connection and happiness, compassion, honesty, resilience, finding good people like Orville, those are internal qualities.
Yeah. Qualities that can be found even if you start, like Evelina, with basically nothing but your own innate goodness beneath all the social pretense.
That's a powerful idea, especially in a world that still often values those outward markers. Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to ponder from this deep dive. Given how much 18th century society stressed appearances, connections, reputation, what does Evelina's story ultimately suggest is the true source of happiness or worth? Is it fitting in, gaining status, or is it something else, integrity, real affection, finding your own moral compass?
And maybe how do those questions about worth, status, and authenticity resonate or maybe not resonate in our own world today?